everyone, it's Miss Lavodi, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how you can recreate a bamboo brush painting with Tayasui Sketches Pro for iPad. This is an image that I have found via Google. It is a copyright-free image and we're going to use this as our photo. And this is the digitally painted version that was created using the Tayasui Sketches Pro app with the brush painting photo underneath it, and our final image has that photo removed. We'll be focusing on using 3 of the brushes from the Tayasui Sketches app. The first brush that we use is for the bamboo stalk. This is the acrylic brush. I'm using the square icon and I refer to this as a dry brush. The second brush we're using is an ink brush or the calligraphy pen. We're using this for the branches of the bamboo and for accenting the spaces on the stalk of the bamboo. The last brush that we'll be using is the watercolor brush, and I will be using this for the leaves, and I will be selecting the second option from the drop down menu of this brush tool, which will allow me to get a more pointed brush stroke. To begin, you're going to create a new sketchbook page, keep it at letter size, and keep it at watercolor paper texture. We're going to start by setting up the layers needed for this project. So up in the upper right hand corner, you're going to click the layer icon and you're going to add a new layer and highlight the center layer. And this is where we're going to import your brush painting photo. So going to find that by clicking the 3 dots in the center of the top of the app and importing your image. Then in the layer icon, you're going to change the opacity of that layer by clicking the gear and sliding the opacity layer down so it should be pretty faint. Make sure you have the layer above your photo highlighted so you're never drawing directly on the photo layer. You're going to select the flat brush, the dry brush, or the acrylic brush tool, and I'm selecting the square icon from the menu underneath it. I'm going to be keeping the size and opacity menu visible on my screen, should be on the right hand side. And for the bamboo stalks, I'm keeping my opacity pretty low. You can see I have it at 13% and I have a small brush size. I am using my Apple Pencil, however you can use this app with just your fingertip or stylus if you have one. I'm starting by outlining and shading in the outer edges of the bamboo stalk and working my way with a darker opacity on the outer edges, lighter opacity in the center. I am skipping that junction or space between the stalks and moving into the second stalk above where I started. Notice that with this particular acrylic brush, dry brush, I'm able to create that kind of rough texture that the brush painting has for the bamboo stalk. So I'm just going to continue this process, playing with the opacity, how light or dark I want the ink to appear on my digital painting. And I'm trying to keep everything contained within the size of the photo layer that I'm seeing. I'm going to continue to use the same brush to create the stalk that I see as the second stalk in this image. I'm just going to be doing this with a slightly smaller brush and a slightly lower opacity, so that way this one will appear more in the background behind the first stalk. Next, we're going to switch over to use the Calligraphy Pen tool, ink tool for the branches. I'm using the second option from the drop-down menu on this brush, and I want to start by accenting the space in between the stalks of the bamboo. I want to try to create a more blotted, heavy line that's a little thicker to thin, and try to accent the direction of that bamboo stalk, the space of it. So you do want this to feel a little quick. If possible, have one side of your line be thicker and the end of your line be more pointed and thinner. And that comes from actually dragging out in a quick motion, either with your finger, with the stylus, with your Apple Pencil, dragging it quickly so you can create that pointed brush stroke. For the branches, I'm trying to trace and follow the line of the branch. I do want to do this in a quick motion. The beauty of working digitally is that we can use the undo button and rework the line. In a real brush painting, we wouldn't necessarily go back and fix any mistakes, but since we're working digitally, we can get this to look the way we want it to. I want you to notice how the brushes are created with a few short brush strokes, and they're not all one continuous line. So you're just going to work your way around the composition and look for these thin lines that you can recreate. And again, try to work fast with them. Try not to backtrack your lines. Try to allow your line to go from thicker to thinner and more pointed. Next up, we're going to switch to the watercolor brush so we can create the leaves. I'm selecting the second brush option from the drop-down menu of the watercolor brush. I like the way that this brush looks because it will allow me, with pressure, to create a more pointed brush stroke, which you can see me practicing here a little bit off to the side, which I encourage you to do, and then you can always undo that later on. So once I know I have the brush set to the way I want it, I can begin to work within the leaf areas. And what I'm doing is starting in the center of the leaf and making sure that I'm creating a line that is going from wider to more pointed. I'm applying more pressure in the center of that leaf so that way I can get my brush stroke to be pointed as it extends out. In this particular area of the brush painting, I'm keeping my opacity a little bit higher because I do want these leaves to appear a little bit darker and more in the foreground. For leaves that would be more in the background, I want to use a lower opacity. We really want to recreate that pointed brush stroke as best as we can because that is a really strong characteristic of an actual brush painting. So remember, we're trying to mimic that digitally. So you want your ends to appear pointed and thin, and you want the other parts of the leaf to appear wider. As you're creating your leaves, try to think about the direction of the leaves and the direction of your brush stroke. Using soft pressure, you can continue to build up the opacity of the leaves. And also think about the space around and in between the leaves. A brush painting is beautiful because of its simplicity. So you want to maintain your negative space and you don't want to overcrowd or let your brush strokes run into each other too much. Negative space is incredibly important to a brush painting. So it is a good practice to work with a lower opacity, something that's more see-through, and then gradually add darker values by bringing that opacity up higher. Remember, you want some of the leaves to appear dark and closer to us, but you want other leaves to appear farther away or in the background with a lower opacity. On the top of the composition, I'm going to be making these leaves a lighter gray with a lower opacity so they are more see-through, so they will appear more like they are in the background. In the last section of leaves, I'm just continuing this process, again working my way from a lighter opacity to a darker opacity, not overcrowding my spaces, simplifying as needed. Keep trying to maintain that nice pointed brush stroke where your leaves appear to go from wider to more pointed. Now I'm taking a moment to hide my photo layer by clicking the eye icon in my photo layer so that way I can check my actual digital painting. And I'm going to go back and accent the edges of the bamboo stalk with my acrylic dry brush so I can darken some of the edges and bring more attention to that area or make it more solid. Remember, in an actual brush painting we would not go back over things. This is sort of an advantage we have to working digitally though. When you are done, you're going to export your finished painting to your camera roll. You're going to click those three dots in the top menu and export it and save your image. Your final digital painting should look something like this, where you have maintained the simplicity of the original brush painting photo. You should have a variety of light and dark values and a variety of brush strokes to represent the different parts of the bamboo.